I let my best friend and his girlfriend move in. She got violent, he defended her. They lied, gaslit, and wrecked my home. I kicked them out and realized I should have done it sooner. Hi Reddit. I didn't think I'd be one of those people writing out a full story like this, but after everything that's happened, I honestly just need to get it all out. This one's long, messy, and still kind of unreal to me. So, here's the setup. I'm 26 male, married to my wife Cindy, 27 female, and until very recently we shared a house with my best friend Mark, 27 male. Mark and I have been friends since elementary school, the kind of ride-or-die friendship where we've lived together on and off since college. Been through bad breakups, road-tripped across states, been best men at each other's weddings. Well, he would have been mine if he hadn't been dealing with something at the time, but close enough. A few months ago, Mark asked if his girlfriend, Heather, 25 female, could move in with us. It was supposed to be temporary while they got on their feet, figured out finances, etc. Cindy and I weren't thrilled. Heather's not exactly easy to be around, but for Mark, we said okay. That was probably our first mistake. Before she even moved in, Heather had a meltdown at our place. She got blackout drunk, screamed at her sister over the phone, threw a picture frame at Mark and stormed out. I pulled Mark aside the next day and said flat out that we weren't comfortable with that kind of behavior in our house. Mark swore it was a one-time thing. She had a rough week, she's embarrassed it won't happen again. We believed him. Mistake number 2, fast forward a bit, things settle. Heather keeps to herself mostly. A little moody, a little high-strung, but manageable. Mark's happy, Cindy's tolerating it. I'm watching, waiting for the other shoe to drop. And then 2 weeks ago it did. It was a Saturday night, pretty low-key. All 4 of us were hanging out in the living room having a few drinks, playing some music. Nothing out of the ordinary. Mark and Heather were drinking more than usual, taking shots, dancing around, that kind of drunk where the volume keeps going up and the words start slurring. Whatever. They're adults. Around 9 p.m., Cindy and I decide to start dinner. Heather's already too far gone to be helpful, mumbling and stumbling, so I take a break from the kitchen to chill on the couch. Cindy heads to our room to change out laundry. Mark finishes up whatever he's cooking and joins me in the living room to talk about my brother's upcoming bachelor party. That's when the banging starts. At first, it's just thuds like someone dropping something. Then it escalates. Thuds become crashes. We hear shouting. Heather screaming. Mark jumps up, goes to their room. Turns out Heather's locked the door and blocked it with furniture. He talks her down, manages to get inside. From the living room, I can hear everything. Her yelling, Mark trying to calm her down, something being ripped off the wall. 10 minutes of this go by and I've had enough. I go in and tell Heather to cool it. She's sweating, eyes glassy, yelling slurs, some of which don't even make sense, and some of which are frankly horrifying considering her own background. I tell her she needs to step outside and get herself under control. She refuses, starts flipping furniture, literally slamming the bed frame up and down like she's trying to break the floor. At that point, I look at Cindy and just say, call the cops. We don't want to press charges. We just want her out of the house before someone gets hurt. The police show up fast, 2 officers calm but serious. They ask us to step outside while they talk to Heather. Then it escalates. From the porch, I can see through the screen door Heather tries to punch one of them. Next thing we know, there are 7 more cops on our lawn. They rush in. We can hear yelling, struggling, more crashing. Eventually, they bring Heather out restrained in one of those full-body transport suits they use when someone is completely uncooperative. Her face is red, she's still shouting, kicking at nothing. The cops ask if we want to press charges. We say no, she didn't hurt us directly, just destroyed her own stuff and wrecked the bedroom. We just want her gone. And we think that's the end of it. Spoiler, it's not. That night, Cindy and I sit up late, cleaning, decompressing, trying to process what the hell just happened. Mark is sitting in silence like someone just hit him with a truck. We think he gets it now. We think this will be the wake-up call he needed. But like I said, I should have seen it coming. Because this wasn't just about one night. This was the start of the unraveling, of the friendship, of the living situation, of everything. Let me take a step back and explain how we even got here in the first place, because honestly, I don't think a lot of people understand how much you can let slide when it's your best friend, especially the one you grew up with. Mark and I met in elementary school, sat next to each other in 3rd grade, bonded over Pokemon cards, and basically stayed attached at the hip through middle school, high school, and beyond. We were those opposites that worked kind of friends. He was always the social one, easygoing, charming, the guy who could talk himself out of anything. I was the more structured one. Bit of a planner, bit of a fixer, maybe too much of both. We lived together in college and again for a year right after. When Cindy and I got married and bought the house, it just made sense that Mark would move in short term. He needed a place we had space, and honestly, I liked having him around. Cindy didn't mind either. She always got along with Mark, thought of him like a goofy cousin. Annoying sometimes, but family. Then came Heather. We didn't meet her right away. Mark started seeing her during the tail end of the Cough Cough event, kind of low-key. She worked at a bar, he met her through mutual friends, and from the beginning she was a bit much. Dramatic, emotional, always seemed to be on the verge of a breakdown or a love bomb. But hey, some people are just intense, right? The first few months, it was all puppy love. Mark was head over heels, said she was passionate, misunderstood, just had a rough childhood. I don't judge people based on their past. Everyone has baggage. But I also believe patterns are louder than stories. Still, when he asked if she could move in Cindy, and I didn't say no, we probably should have. He said it'd be temporary, 3 months max while she found a new job, and they saved for a place together. He promised it wouldn't interfere with the house dynamic. She's just looking for stability, he told us. And we've got the space. It'll be fine. We were reluctant, but we agreed. The first red flag was the very week she moved in. She got wasted one night, not a couple glasses of wine wasted, but screaming, slurring, breaking things wasted. Her sister called, they got into it on speakerphone, and suddenly Heather was hurling a coaster across the living room and sobbing into Mark's lap. She ended up storming out and walking to a friend's place barefoot. Cindy and I looked at each other like, what the hell did we just agree to? The next morning, Mark was all apologies. She was just triggered, he said. Bad family dynamics, she promised it won't happen again. Heather apologized too, brought flowers from the store, baked banana bread, which she later said she hated making, by the way. I didn't believe her, but I wanted to believe Mark. And that became the pattern. Heather would blow up and Mark would smooth it over. One time she cursed Cindy out for using the wrong detergent in the washer, said it gave her a rash. Cindy laughed at first, thinking it was a joke. It wasn't. Heather went off. Then apologized the next day with coffee and a note. Another time she accused Mark of flirting with a grocery clerk because he said, "Have a nice day," too nicely. He laughed it off. She cried in the car. Then they made up loudly 2 rooms down from us. We never saw bruises or anything like that. It wasn't that kind of situation, but it was volatile, and it was exhausting. You never knew what version of Heather you were going to get. Sometimes she was fun, surprisingly thoughtful, weird sense of humor, great at trivia nights. But other times she'd get a few drinks in her and start sobbing about how no one respects her, how everyone treats her like trash, how she's always the villain. Cindy started avoiding her altogether. I still tried to play mediator, kept telling myself this was just temporary, that we just had to wait it out until they got their own place. But Mark kept moving the goalposts. At first it was 3 months, then 6. Then we're still figuring it out. Every time we brought it up, he had an excuse. She just started a new job, it'd be hard to move right now. The market's crazy. We're waiting for her probation period to end. It was always something. Meanwhile, Cindy and I started tiptoeing around in our own home. We stopped inviting people over, couldn't trust what version of Heather would be out that day. We started texting each other from room to room just to avoid saying something that might set her off. And yet, I kept defending Mark. To Cindy, to myself. Because that's what you do for your best friend, right? You give the benefit of the doubt. You believe he sees something you don't. You assume he's handling it even when the signs say he isn't. It wasn't until that Saturday night, the night of the incident, that I finally saw the full picture. That wasn't just a bad night. That was someone completely losing control in our home while we stood by hoping she'd run out of energy before the drywall cracked. And when the cops showed up when they put her in that restraint suit and drove off with her screaming in the back of the cruiser, I thought this would be the moment Mark finally saw it too. For about 48 hours, I thought I was right. He was quiet, apologetic, shaken, said she scared him, said she didn't remember anything, said he needed to rethink everything. We stayed up late talking. He even said, "I think I'm done. I can't keep living like this." Cindy and I were cautious but hopeful. We were ready to forgive, to help him transition out. We even said he could stay with us while he figured things out if he needed space away from her. But that was before the court date, before the doorbell cam. Before the gaslighting and the excuses and the backpedaling. Before I realized this wasn't going to be a clean break. It was going to be a drawn-out mess, and that no matter how much I wanted to save the friendship, I couldn't do it alone. The days after Heather's arrest were weirdly quiet. She was released the next morning with a court date pending, and for a little while it actually seemed like Mark was taking things seriously. He kept saying they needed space, that he was still shaken up, that he'd never seen her like that before. He kept repeating that never seen her like that before, as if saying it enough times would make it true. He didn't go see her that day, or the next. We talked that week, him and me, more than we had in months, about how exhausted he was, how ashamed he felt, how he just wanted to help her, to be the guy who didn't abandon her like everyone else supposedly had. He cried one night in the kitchen while we were cleaning up broken glass. Not dramatic sobbing, just these quiet, embarrassed tears. Said he knew it was over. And I believed him. Stupidly, I really did. Because we'd been through so much together. Because I thought he'd finally hit his limit. Because when your best friend looks you in the eye and says, "She scared me, man. I didn't even recognize her," you believe him. But by the end of the week, I started noticing the signs. First, it was a text I caught a glimpse of on his phone, her name lighting up his screen, followed by, "I'm sorry." Then it was the shift in his tone. Less guilt, more rationalizing. "She's just really stressed. She blacked out, she doesn't even remember it. The cops escalated it way too fast. She needs help, not punishment." I didn't say much at first. I just listened. I told myself maybe he needed to vent, that processing things doesn't always look linear, that maybe this was just denial before the real break. But then came the court date. Because the charges were felony level, due to assaulting an officer, Cindy and Mark were both subpoenaed to testify since they were present when it all started. I wasn't called, which honestly pissed me off more than I expected. I was the one who called the cops. I was the one who tried to de-escalate. But whatever. Legal systems are weird. Cindy came home that afternoon with this look on her face like she'd walked through a fever dream. Apparently, the DA offered Heather a plea deal. Probation-mandated therapy AA meetings. If the judge approved it, she'd avoid jail provided she complied with all the terms. But that wasn't the part that bothered Cindy. It was how Mark acted in court. He was defending her, she told me that night. Like full-on defending her. Saying she didn't know what she was doing, that it was out of character, that it was really unfortunate how everything escalated. I stared at her. Unfortunate? Yeah, like she tripped and fell into a police officer's face. I laughed, not because it was funny, but because I couldn't believe it. Just a week ago, he was swearing he was done. Now he was playing publicist. Then came the doorbell camera incident. Cindy and I had gone out of town for a couple days to visit her parents. While we were away, we checked the doorbell app like we always do, mostly to make sure packages weren't stolen or that the house was still standing. And what do we see? Mark's car pulling out of the driveway, followed by Heather's. At the exact same time. The implication was clear. They'd left together, which meant she had either been at the house or at least picked him up from it. When we got home, I confronted him. "Did Heather come inside while we were gone?" He blinked. "No, why would she?" "Because her car left at the same time as yours. She picked me up. We went for coffee. You said you two weren't seeing each other. I didn't say that. I said we were taking space." I stared at him. "Mark, did she come inside or not?" "No, I swear, she never stepped foot in here." "You can check the footage. Camera doesn't cover the side door." Well, she didn't. He said it flatly, confidently, too confidently. I didn't believe him. But what was I supposed to do? Waterboard my best friend on the porch. Cindy and I talked that night and agreed if she had come inside, we'd be kicking him out. No questions asked. But I wasn't ready to go nuclear. Not yet. Then came my brother's bachelor party. Mark was invited, of course. It was low-key, just a bunch of us at a cabin for the weekend, grilling, playing cards, drinking beers by the fire. No drama, or so I thought. The second night, we're all sitting around swapping stories, and someone brings up crazy exes. Lighthearted stuff. Everyone's laughing. And then Mark, very serious, says, "You know, sometimes people snap because no one gives them a chance to cool down. That's what happened with Heather." Everyone blew it out of proportion. I turned my head slowly, like maybe I'd misheard him. "You're saying her assaulting a cop was our fault? I'm just saying she was trying to leave and people kept getting in her face?" She flipped a bed, She tried to punch an officer. He shrugged. She wasn't in her right mind. Alcohol's a hell of a thing. I didn't say anything then, not in front of everyone. I just stood up and walked away. Later that night, I texted Cindy. Me. We're done. He's moving out. Her agreed. I waited until we got home to say it to his face. I wanted to give him the chance to come clean, to be the guy I thought he was. One last chance. So the night after we got back, I asked him to sit down. I told him we knew she'd been over, that we saw the cars, that it didn't matter whether she physically stepped inside the point, was he'd lied. Again. I told him we couldn't live like this, that the trust was gone, that his refusal to draw any kind of line with her had turned our home into a disaster zone. He tried to argue. She's not as bad as you think. She's trying to change. She was going to her brother's, you escalated it. That last one hit me sideways. I escalated it. I was the one who told her to go outside and calm down. I was the one who said we weren't pressing charges. You were hiding in the hallway while she was screaming racial slurs and throwing lamps. She doesn't even remember it. Then why is she saying I started a confrontation? He went quiet. Then he said, I don't know. She's confused. We all were. I took a breath. Mark, you're moving out. He didn't fight it, just nodded. Yeah, we're getting a place together. Of course they were. Cindy and I agreed she wasn't allowed back inside, even to grab her things unless a police officer was present. We told Mark we expected a formal apology, not just from Heather, from him, for the lies, for the manipulation, for putting us in a position where we had to choose between our safety and our loyalty. He hasn't apologized. Instead, he keeps trying to spin it, keeps saying we overreacted, that the cops were too aggressive, that Heather's trauma explains everything, that he was just trying to keep the peace. But here's the thing about peace. If you have to lie to everyone around you to maintain it, it's not peace, it's theater. And I'm done being part of his show. The night Mark officially told us he and Heather were moving out, I felt nothing. No anger, no sadness. Just a kind of numbness, like my brain had already processed the loss weeks ago, and this was just the paperwork. It was the kind of emotional flatline that only comes when you've reached the end of a very long rope and let go. We were standing in the kitchen. Cindy was at the dining table quietly watching her tea steep. Mark leaned against the counter, arms crossed like he was bracing for impact. But there was no shouting, no dramatic confrontation. I just told him the move-out deadline, gave him the officer escort date for Heather. Asked if he had any questions. He didn't. He said, I know this isn't how you wanted things to go. And I replied, it's exactly how it needed to go. I think he wanted me to fight, to push back, to beg him to choose better. But I'd already done that, multiple times. And he'd made his choice again and again. All I was doing now was accepting it. After he left that night, Cindy and I sat in the living room surrounded by silence. She looked at me and said, Are you okay? I paused. Then honestly, I don't know. Because it's one thing to lose respect for someone. It's another thing to realize you've been defending a version of them that hasn't existed in a long time. That's what hit me the hardest. Not Heather, not the screaming, not even the betrayal. It was the slow, sinking realization that I hadn't just lost a roommate or a friend, I'd lost my idea of who Mark was. For years I told people he was the guy who'd never leave you hanging, the guy who'd drive across state lines to bail you out, the guy who might be a mess sometimes but who'd always show up when it mattered. But over the last few months, slowly, painfully, I started to see the cracks. The way he dodged accountability, the way he twisted facts to protect his comfort, the way he let people walk all over others as long as it kept him from having to deal with hard conversations. He wasn't showing up anymore. He was hiding. Behind excuses, behind Heather, behind some fantasy version of himself where being loyal meant enabling chaos. And I had enabled it too because I didn't want to believe that someone I considered a brother could be so blind or so selfish. I spent a lot of time that week thinking about loyalty, what it really means, where the line is between sticking by someone and losing yourself in the process. Because I used to think loyalty was unconditional, that if you loved someone, really loved them, you stood by them no matter what, through the fights, through the screw-ups, through the ugliness, but that only works if the other person is also trying, if they're choosing growth, choosing accountability, choosing to be better not just for you but for themselves. Mark wasn't choosing that. And neither was Heather. They were choosing delusion. And I was done paying rent on that fantasy. Cindy helped pull me out of it honestly. She didn't say I told you so, she never rubbed it in. But the night after we gave Mark his deadline, she said something I won't forget. I think you've been trying to save both of them. And no one ever asked you to. It was like getting punched in the chest, because she was right. Somewhere along the way, I had made it my responsibility to keep the peace. To protect the house, protect the friendship, protect the illusion that we were all still okay. That it was all just a rough patch. That if I mediated one more fight, diffused one more tantrum, cleaned up one more shattered picture frame, things would go back to normal. But normal had left the building a long time ago, and it wasn't my job to fix that. A few days later, Mark texted, "Mark, hey, just wanted to say thanks for not pressing charges that night. I know it was bad." I stared at the message for a long time, not because I didn't know how to respond, but because I didn't want to. There was nothing left to say. I left it on read. Because at that point, forgiveness wasn't the issue. I wasn't mad anymore. I wasn't waiting for an apology. I wasn't hoping for reconciliation. I had already grieved the friendship. Now I was just making space for something else. Something quieter, healthier, more honest. My home was finally returning to that home. Mark moved out on a Wednesday. He packed quietly, methodically, without ceremony. Heather didn't come with him that day. Per our request, she scheduled her pickup for the following weekend with a police escort. He didn't say much as he moved boxes from his room to the car. Neither did I. It wasn't hostile. It wasn't warm. Just two people who used to be family now navigating around each other like strangers. When he was done, he stood in the doorway for a second longer than he needed to, looked around, said, "Place'll be quiet without me." I said, "That's the idea." He forced a laugh, but we both knew it wasn't a joke. He didn't apologize. I didn't ask him to. I think we both knew that an apology now would be too late to mean anything and too early to mean everything. When the door finally closed, I sat down on the couch, took a deep breath, and listened. Silence. No footsteps from down the hall, no muffled yelling behind a bedroom door, no forced laughter. No tension vibrating in the walls, just peace. Cindy walked in a few minutes later and sat beside me. "You okay?" she asked. "Yeah," I said. "For the first time in a while?" "Yeah." And I meant it. The days that followed were strangely calm. There was nothing dramatic about it. No big emotional collapse, no impulse to text him, no urge to relive the arguments, just quiet. The kind of quiet you only notice when you've been living in noise for too long. We changed the locks that weekend, not out of fear, just for closure. Heather came back that Saturday to collect the last of her things. A police officer stood in the driveway. She didn't make eye contact, didn't speak, just loaded up her boxes while Mark kept his head down. She didn't look angry. She looked small, hollow, like a person made of excuses who had finally run out of anyone left to explain herself to. I didn't watch them leave. I was in the backyard playing fetch with our dog. When I came back in, they were gone for good. And that was that. No final scene, no movie-ending closure. Just the sound of a car engine fading into the distance and the quiet click of a door that wasn't opening again. Since then, I've been rebuilding not just the house, but the way I live inside it. I didn't realize how much of myself I'd been giving away to maintain peace that didn't exist. How often I bit my tongue. How frequently I made excuses for someone who stopped deserving them. How hard I clung to a version of friendship that hadn't been real for a long time. Mark and I haven't spoken since the move. He hasn't reached out. I haven't either. And I'm okay with that. Because this wasn't a sudden ending. It was a slow erosion. 1,000 little moments where I should have said this isn't okay and didn't. 1,000 second chances. 1,000 swallowed frustrations. Until there was nothing left but a silence that finally felt honest. I still think about him sometimes, mostly when I walk past his old room, or when I hear a song we used to blast on road trips. I miss that version of him. I probably always will. But I don't miss the last few months. I don't miss being lied to. I don't miss living in tension. I don't miss trying to hold up a friendship that couldn't hold itself up. People talk about breakups like they only happen in romance, but losing your best friend. That's a heartbreak too. One that doesn't come with closure playlists or movies to cry to. One that just sort of ends and teaches you who you are without them. I'm still figuring that part out. But here's what I know. My house is quiet now. And for the first time in a long time, I don't flinch at the sound of my own front door.